Have you ever felt a silence so ancient it made the stars seem young? Have you ever stood in a place so still it felt the world had not yet begun? Before cities bore names, before the first bricks were kissed by fire, there was breath and there was sky. The wind did not blow then, it listened. And in that hush, between horizon and heaven, a man walked barefoot over sacred dust, unburdened by time, unafraid of gods. They say his name was Enmeduranki, not born like other kings, not of clay or blood or woman's cry, but of shimmer and light, pulled from the river's mist and crowned not by men, but by memory. He was of Sippar, the sun's city, where the first fires for writing were kindled and the golden god Shamash blinked through every noonday. It is said he did not seek the gods. They sought him. One dusk, while the horizon burned amber and reed boats whispered across the shallows, Enmeduranki knelt in the sands. He had no question, no prayer, only stillness. And that was enough. For the gods crave silence more than sacrifice. Shamash, the Sun Lord, saw him, and the great stars tilted. The sky cracked, a ladder of light unfurled down from the firmament, not runged with wood or rope, but with breath. A soundless column of gold, where each step pulsed like a heartbeat. And Enmeduranki, without word or gesture, stepped upon it, and rose. Higher than the hawks, higher than thunder, higher than any eye dared to look. Those who watched could not remember what they saw. The moment he vanished, so too did their memory. But the river remembered, the reeds remembered, and so do we. Above the world, above wind and word, Enmeduranki entered the chamber of the gods. There were no walls, no ceiling, only light, woven into the shapes of thoughts not yet spoken. Shamash stood not in form, but in flame, and beside him, the watchers, the Apkallu, part fish, part man, part dream. Silent scribes who held tablets not of clay, but of sky. These were the sky tablets, etched not with stylus, but with intention. They did not hold stories. They were stories, not records, revelations. They say the gods taught him not with voices, but by placing knowing in his breath. One inhalation, and he saw the turning of constellations. One exhalation, and he heard the language of shadow. His eyes closed, and within that darkness bloomed visions of how kings should rule, with light on their foreheads and dust on their feet. Time slowed, or perhaps time stopped. In the realm above breath, there is no before, no after, only meaning. But Enmeduranki longed still for earth, not for throne or wealth, but for the whisper of rivers, the scent of tamarisk. The gods, in their silence, allowed it. Before he returned, they gave him one final thing, a sky tablet, small enough to hold, heavy enough to matter. It shimmered not with light, but with remembrance. They warned him, read, but do not rewrite. Know, but do not speak. Hobraim descended as he rose, without step, without sound. When his feet kissed soil once more, he was no longer only king. He was keeper. The people of Sippar gathered in awe. He did not speak of what he saw. He only looked to the stars with a sorrowful joy, as though they were kin he could no longer touch. It is said Enmeduranki founded a line of priest-kings, the Baru, diviners who read smoke and dreams. He taught them not just ritual, but the rhythm beneath ritual. Not just how to read omens, but how to listen to what omens refused to say. They gathered in quiet temples, tracing the motions of sky, the flutter of birds, the shape of entrails. But all their arts came from one origin, the tablet hidden in shadow. None were allowed to see it. Not even the most devout. It was kept beneath 7 veils, under stone, beneath silence. Only Enmeduranki touched it, and only in dreams. The city of Sippar flourished, its towers rose, its waters glittered, but the king grew stiller year by year. He walked less, slept more, not from weariness, but from listening. He heard things others could not. A voice in the dust, a song behind thunder. He began to speak in riddles. "The stars are falling upward," he once whispered. "The future is already weeping." The priests feared for him. Some believed he was unraveling, others believed he was ascending again, this time from within. Then, one morning, he was gone. No servant saw him leave, no guard heard a footstep, only the scent of myrrh where he once lay, and a faint warmth where the tablet had rested. The tablet, too, was gone. What was written on it? Some say it held the first calendar, the divine rhythm of moons and floods. Others say it told of the creation before creation, when the gods themselves were children and time was still learning how to walk. A few whisper darker tales, that the tablet showed the end, not in fire or flood, but in forgetting, that someday the stars would dim, not from death, but disinterest, that the gods, grown weary, would sleep again, and that we, their children, would sing only echoes. But these are only fragments, and the tablet remains lost. Still, the line of Baru remained. Each priest trained in silence, each one repeating the gestures Enmeduranki taught, none knowing why, only trusting. It is said, even now, beneath the ruins of Sippar, in chambers where no foot treads, the winds sometimes stir in strange patterns, circles within circles, breaths that do not belong to any living thing, and in those winds, a whisper, "He is not gone." He listens still. Have you ever dreamed a dream that felt older than you? A vision not of your life, but of the world's memory? Perhaps you too have heard the sky tablet's hum, that low sacred thrum behind thunder, behind breath, behind the hush of dawn. Perhaps Enmeduranki was not the only one chosen. Perhaps we all are, if we remember how to listen. But the mists hold another tale. Have you ever walked through fog so thick that your breath vanished into it, as if the air were tasting you back? Have you ever looked at the moon and felt it watching you, not with judgment, but with memory? The moon does not speak. It remembers. And in the ancient city of where silver light once pooled across ziggurats like spilled milk, the moon was not just a light in the sky. It was a god, a listener, a mirror, and beneath that mirror, the priestesses walked. They were not many, only 13, always 13, never more, never less. Chosen at birth, raised without name, trained to feel time through tides and dreams. They did not speak during daylight, only at night when the sky darkened and the moon opened its eye. And among them was one who would remember everything. She was born in silence, not the silence of absence, but the sacred stillness of recognition. Her mother did not cry. Her father did not hold her. She was taken from the birthing mat and brought straight to the house of Inanna, the great temple of the moon, rising like a stairway carved from clouds. She was the 13th, the last. She never knew her name. They gave her only titles: Child of the Crescent, Breath of the Night, She who listens between ticks. But in the hollow spaces of sleep, she sometimes dreamed a name, short and soft, like wind against palm leaves. But when she awoke, it was gone. She grew among shadows and silver. The moon priestesses taught her not by words, but by presence. How to wash her hands with water that had never touched sunlight. How to read the silence between owl cries. How to sit so still that the stars seemed to drift around her like fish. She learned the sacred steps, spiraling paths traced in ash around the temple. Each movement a word, each pause a breath. At first she mimicked, but slowly her limbs remembered what her mind could not. as if she were not learning, but recalling. And every night she stood on the temple's highest terrace, beneath the full eye of Inanna, god of the moon, and whispered nothing and everything. But the moon is not always full. One night it vanished. It was not new moon dark. It was hollow. The sky refused to look down. The stars blinked faster, as if shivering. That night she had a dream, a corridor made of salt, walls dripping, a voice, hers but older, saying, "You are the last. The mirror is breaking." She awoke trembling, her hands covered in cold sweat and powdered obsidian. The priestesses gathered in silence. None spoke, but all knew. Something had been remembered too early. That dusk, they led her to the inner sanctum, a chamber sealed since the temple stone was first placed. Only the 13th was ever permitted to enter, but no one knew what happened inside. The priestess before her had never returned. She descended alone. The staircase curved like a spiral shell. Every step down hummed beneath. Her heel, as if the stone was not supporting her, but reading her. She passed 7 gates, each darker than the last, until finally she stood before the final veil, a curtain made not of cloth, but smoke. It shimmered, then parted. The chamber beyond was round, no corners, no ceiling, only the pale light of the moon shining directly through a hole in the roof, illuminating a pool of water so still it reflected breath. At its center stood a mirror. It was not metal, not glass. It was something older, a polished shard of night itself. She approached, and the mirror moved. Not its surface, its memory. She saw not her reflection, but thousands, faces like hers, eyes like hers, all the 13th before, each one stepping into the chamber, each one vanishing. Their mouths moved, but no sound came, until one face, the first, opened her eyes and looked directly at her and spoke. It is time to remember the ritual that even the moon forgot. The mirror shattered, not loudly, but with a sound like breath leaving a dying bird. The chamber went dark. The moon above blinked out, and her body remembered. She awoke in the ziggurat courtyard, surrounded by the other 12. They looked at her not with fear, but reverence. They bowed. She was now high one of the hollow light, not merely a listener, but a speaker, and her voice would summon a ritual not performed, since the first mud of Ur was shaped by hand and prayer. The ritual of the returning. No records of it remained, no inscriptions, no tablets, only a dream that passed from one 13th to the next. Until now. The city prepared. Oil was gathered. Milk was drawn from beasts no longer named. A harp of reeds was strung with hair plucked under eclipse. And on the 7th night, with the moon a faint sliver like a nail print in the sky, the ritual began. She stood barefoot in the temple's highest room. The mirror, now broken, had been reassembled, not in shape, but in pattern. Shards placed in a spiral on the floor, each edge catching the moonlight like whispers. Around her, the 12 priestesses hummed. Not a song, but a vibration, old and low. She began to walk the spiral. Every step took a memory from her. First, her childhood, then her face, then the scent of her mother's breath, then the feel of stone beneath her hands. She walked until nothing remained but rhythm. And in the center of the spiral, she knelt, spoke the words only the mirror knew, and vanished. No one knows what happened next. Some say she became the moon itself, that her breath now lives in its shadows, guiding tides, whispering to those who walk alone at night. Others believe she stepped beyond time, that she entered the realm where the gods keep forgotten rituals, and that one day, when the stars realign and the reeds bloom red, she will return with a new mirror. Not of reflection, but of knowing. The temple of Inanna still stands, though buried, now beneath centuries of silt and dust. But when the moon is high and the night is clear, some say you can hear a hum from deep within its broken stones. A hum that sounds like 13 voices, or perhaps just one, the last one, the 13th. Have you ever looked into your own eyes in a dark mirror and seen someone else? Felt a memory that wasn't yours stirring behind the glass? Perhaps the mirror remembers you. Perhaps the moon is waiting, and further still, there is one more story. Have you ever stood at the mouth of a cave and felt it breathing? Not with air, but with something deeper, something old, slow and solemn, like the heartbeat of the world beneath your feet. There is a place beyond breath, beyond warmth, beyond return. It is called Ereshkigal. It lies beneath the roots of the earth, under the rivers, beneath the foundations of temples and the silence of graves. It does not judge. It does not cry. It waits. And in that waiting sits a queen. She does not wear a crown. She does not command. She is not feared for wrath, but known for stillness. Her name is whispered in the hush between funeral chants, in the shiver of soil when the last shovel falls. She is Ereshkigal, queen of the great below, and her song has never been sung by mortal lips, but it has been heard, in dreams, in grief, in endings. Before there were cities, before there were names, there were sisters. Inanna of the heavens, bright as morning, bold as storm, clothed in radiance, and Ereshkigal of the underworld, solemn as stone, robed in silence, crowned in shadow. They were not rivals. They were not enemies. They were two mirrors of the same breath. But light longs to descend, and even goddesses are drawn by mystery. One day, Inanna chose to visit the underworld. Some say to comfort her sister, some say to steal her throne. Others say it was simply time, as it always is. Inanna prepared, wrapped herself in divine adornments, gathered the 7 sacred objects, and made her descent through the 7 gates. But this is not Inanna's tale. This is the story of the one who waited, who always waits, who gave everything, including joy, to become the keeper of endings. When Inanna came, Ereshkigal did not rise. She remained still on her throne of dust and bone, her hands resting upon her knees like river stones. She watched her sister pass through the gates, watched each ornament stripped away, each glory undone. And when Inanna stood bare and mortal before her, Ereshkigal did not smile, nor did she weep. She only whispered, "Why now?" And the chamber echoed. The story says Ereshkigal sentenced her sister to death, hung her body on a hook, turned her eyes away. But that is a story written by light, by those who never linger in shadow. In truth, she sang, a low, endless melody, neither mourning nor mercy, a sound that turned flesh to memory, memory to mist, a song that only the dead could understand. It was not punishment, it was remembrance. She was not killing her sister, she was welcoming her, but the world above cannot bear the silence of the below. The gods intervened, sent messengers, bargained, cried. And when Inanna rose again, brought back to breath and brightness, something shifted in Ereshkigal's realm. Not rage, not jealousy, but sorrow. For the first time, the queen of the underworld wept, not for her sister, but for herself. No one asks what it means to remain, to hold every ending, to remember every face turned pale, to cradle the bones of empires. Ereshkigal does not forget. She holds the names of those long turned to dust. She remembers the smell of each soul. She can recall the final heartbeat of kings and the last breath of lovers. But no one comes to thank her. No altars rise in her name, no temples glow with oil for her comfort. She is the keeper of grief, not loud, not wailing, but the quiet grief that folds itself into time. They say she once had a child, born of silence and sorrow, shaped not in womb, but in will. Namtar, the herald, her messenger, her only voice, he walks between worlds, delivering fates, marking moments, but even he cannot soothe her. For Ereshkigal's song was never meant to be heard, it was meant to be held, and the only ones who understand it are those who do not return. Yet sometimes her soul does return. Once, long ago, a woman fell from a tower, not by force, but by surrender. Her life unraveled in a single breath. She fell not to the earth, but through it, into Ereshkigal. She was met not by guards or flames, but by stillness, by the gentle touch of dust on her cheeks. And in that silence, she heard a song, low, tender, deep as roots. She followed it, through fields of ash, through corridors lined with the memories of those who never spoke, past doors that did not open but allowed her through. And there, at the end, she saw her, Ereshkigal, not as a queen, but as a woman, barefoot, ancient, worn, eyes vast as the void between stars. The woman wept, not in fear, but in recognition. The queen opened her arms. They say the woman returned to the world above, alive but changed. She no longer feared endings. She sat by dying fires without flinching. She comforted mourners not with words, but with presence. And when she passed on, many years later, no rites were needed. The wind carried her. The soil opened, and Ereshkigal remembered her. Have you ever held someone's hand as they slipped into sleep and felt that they were not leaving, but returning? Have you ever sat in the dark and found yourself cradled by something unseen, something sorrowful but sacred? Perhaps that is Ereshkigal, not a goddess of punishment, but of passage. Not an end, but a hush. The stars above shine bright, but beneath them lies a deeper sky, a sky of stone, of shadow, of song. And it is said, when the wind dies and the earth goes still and the moon turns its face away, if you listen closely, you will hear it. The song of Ereshkigal, a lullaby for the lost, a hymn for the hollow, a melody that holds the shape of every silence. But listen, there is yet another name whispered in the wind. Have you ever heard water that didn't ripple? A river so still, so dark, it felt like looking into the mouth of sleep. There is such a river, not drawn on maps, not sung in lullabies. Its name is not spoken, but it is felt. In the silence before grief, in the moment a name is forgotten. The Mesopotamians did not write of it in fear, but in reverence. They knew its ferry, its boatman. He who rows without rest, whose face is never seen, who waits not with impatience, but with certainty. He's not a god, he's not a judge, he's the river's breath. And tonight, we ride with him. It begins with a child, a girl no older than 7, quiet as reeds, her eyes wide as dusk. She had fallen ill. Slowly, softly, not with fever, not with pain, just with stillness. Her breath grew shallow, her gaze grew far, when she finally closed her eyes. No one cried. They simply placed her on linen, wrapped her in dates and salt, and carried her to the river's edge. They did not call it a burial. They called it a crossing, and the river accepted her. But this tale is not about what she left. It is about what she met. She opened her eyes to find herself on the edge of a shore she did not know. The sand was not warm, the sky was not bright, everything shimmered in the colors of soot and silver. She stood barefoot, wrapped in the same linen, but dry. Beside her was a small clay figure, a jackal-faced man with wings of soot. He did not speak, only pointed. There was a boat, long, narrow, without oar or mast. It floated without touching the water. and in it stood the boatman. He was tall, though slightly hunched, cloaked in a garment that moved like smoke. His hands, the only part of him visible, were old, lined like bark, but steady. He held out his hand. The child stepped forward. There were no coins, no toll, no words, only crossing. She climbed into the boat, and it moved. The Black River is not measured in distance. It is measured in forgetting. As they drifted, the child felt her name begin to soften. Not vanish, just loosen, like threads unraveling gently. The boatman said nothing, but he hummed. A low, slow tune. It had no melody. It had no rhythm. And yet it filled her chest with a strange comfort, like being remembered by something older than time. Along the river banks, she saw shadows, figures not distinct, not whole. People, maybe. Memories, perhaps. They stood still. Some waved, some watched. One sang without voice. And still the boat moved. She looked up. There was no moon, but something hung above them. A pale ring, neither light nor absence. It pulsed softly, like a waiting breath. The boatman hummed louder. She did not know how long they drifted. There was no day, no night, only passage. And with each moment she felt lighter, not in body, in burden. Her fears, the dark, the alone, the gone, softened. Her memories of scraped knees, warm bread, a mother's hands, all faded, not in pain, but in peace. She looked at the boatman and asked, not with words, but with gaze, "Who are you?" And in that moment she saw, not his face, not his story, but his sorrow. He had rowed this river since the first breath left the first throat. He had ferried kings who wept, queens who laughed, warriors who trembled, infants who smiled. He remembered them all, not their names, not their deeds, but their ending. Each one carried within him like sparks within ash. He was not lonely, but he was alone. He had once had a name, a face, a life. But the river had taken it, gently, in exchange for the oarless passage. He had not resisted. It had been his honor, but even honors grow heavy. The girl reached out and touched his hand. He flinched, not from fear, but from the echo of something long gone. Touch without toll. And in that moment, something changed. The boat slowed. They had reached the far shore. The girl stepped out. The shore was not sand, not stone. It was memory, made soft. It welcomed her feet like old earth greeting rain. She turned to look back. The boatman stood still, and for the first time she spoke. A whisper, "Will you ever rest?" The boatman did not reply, but in the stillness she heard, "When the last name is forgotten, when the last breath no longer waits, when the river becomes a mirror." And with that, the boat turned, drifted away, and vanished. The child walked into the mist, not afraid, not sad, just ready. Some say she became a guide for other children who cross, that she sings the boatman's hum to them, that she waits at the landing, hand extended. Others say she turned into light, swallowed by the stars, whispering comfort to those not yet gone. But the boatman still rose. You may feel him in dreams, when your breath catches for no reason, when you awaken with tears and don't know why, when you see a river and your heart stills. He is there, waiting. Have you ever watched water and felt it looking back? Have you felt your name tremble, not in fear, but in release? Perhaps the boatman is near. Perhaps he always has been. But the desert wind carries yet another tale. Have you ever felt the weight of silence before a storm? A hush so deep it seemed to fold the world in breathless waiting? In the realms where gods walk between shadows and light, there exists a figure neither loved nor hated, only known. He is Namtar, the keeper of fates, the silent scribe who moves unseen between life and death. He is not cruel. He is not kind. He is. and his story is woven of shadows and whispers. Long ago, when the world was young and the gods still walked openly among men, the queen of the underworld, Ereshkigal, called upon her servant to carry her will. Namtar was born from silence itself, a spirit both feared and respected. He bore many names: the plague bringer, the fate dealer, the silent messenger. But none captured the truth, that he was neither destroyer nor savior, but a weaver of destinies, bound by the ancient laws that even gods dare not break. It is said that Namtar walks the earth as a shadow, passing through crowds unnoticed, yet marking the moments when breath falters and hearts cease. His touch is cold, but not malicious, more like the closing of a book, the last word written. Once there was a child, fragile as dawn mist, who caught sight of Namtar. She was the daughter of a village healer, gifted with a gentle touch and eyes full of wonder. One evening, as the sun dipped behind palm trees and stars began their silent vigil, the child wandered too far into the reeds. There, beneath the twisted branches, she saw him, tall and still, his face veiled in shadow. His hands held a tablet, worn and etched with names. She did not run, she did not cry. Instead, she asked softly, "Why do you carry the names of those who die?" Namtar did not answer. He only showed her the tablet. Upon it were names not yet spoken, not yet whispered by lips, but already written in starlight. "Are these fates?" she breathed. He nodded. "Can they be changed?" The tablet shimmered, the wind stilled, and for a heartbeat, Namtar seemed to hesitate. But then, as if pulled by an unseen thread, he closed the tablet and vanished. The child grew with that question burning inside her. Can fate be rewritten? In the villages, the healer taught her to mix herbs and chant old prayers. The child learned to ease pain, to soothe fever, to bring comfort. Yet always, in her heart, lingered the shadow of that silent messenger. Years passed. The child became a woman. One night, the village was struck by a sudden illness, a sickness unseen before, swift and cruel. The healer worked tirelessly, but the tide of death could not be stemmed. The woman knew what must be done. She sought out Namtar. In a clearing bathed in moonlight, she found him again. The tablet in his hands glowed faintly, names dancing like fireflies. She stepped forward, fearless. "I beg you," she whispered, "release one name. Let one life be spared." For a moment, Namtar did not move. Then, slowly, he extended the tablet. A name appeared. Hers. The woman's heart thundered. "Why mine?" He bowed his head. "Because you asked." And then something incredible happened. Namtar's shadow stretched and twisted. The tablet cracked, and a single line of fate unraveled like silk. The woman's breath returned, steady and strong. But the cost was clear. Namtar vanished into the night, leaving behind the broken tablet and a question that lingered like smoke. If one fate can be changed, what of the others? The villagers whispered of miracles and curses. Some called the woman a savior, others feared her, but none could deny that fate had been touched. From that night on, Namtar was not just a silent messenger. He was a keeper of choices. He walked between worlds, balancing the threads of destiny with delicate hands. It is said that when the wind carries a chill, when dreams twist and break, it is Namtar at work, weighing what must be done against what might be. He does not speak of mercy. He does not boast of power. He is bound by the laws older than gods. Yet, in his silence, there is a whisper of hope. Have you ever felt the weight of a choice, heavy as stone but light as breath? Have you wondered if a single word, a single step, can change the course of stars? Perhaps fate is not a chain, but a river. Flowing, shifting, sometimes still, and somewhere, just beyond the horizon, Namtar waits. Not to end the story, but to keep it moving, and still, the stories do not sleep. Have you ever dreamed of a garden hidden beneath the flowing river? A place where roots drink the sky's memory and stones whisper secrets older than time. Beneath the great Tigris, where waters run deep and steady, there is said to be such a garden, lost to sight but alive in breath and shadow. It is a place between worlds, where earth meets water, where life bends quietly toward eternity. The garden beneath the Tigris is no garden of flowers or fruit. It is a garden of stories, soft as moss, sharp as thorns, woven of silence and forgotten light, and it holds a secret. Long ago, when Mesopotamia was still young, before the city walls rose like mountains, the river carried life. Slow, steady, eternal. At its banks lived a woman known simply as Zari. She was a keeper of herbs, a gatherer of tales. She walked barefoot through reeds and mud, listening to the river's voice, tracing the shapes of fish scales, following the flow of water like a thread through time. Zari was not a priestess or queen. She had no name carved in stone or sung in temples, but the river knew her. Each dawn she would descend to the water's edge, dipping her hands into the cool current. She would whisper to the river, not with words, but with breath. Her quiet song, half forgotten, carried from the depths of memory, and the river answered. One morning, as the sun rose like molten gold, Zari saw a shimmer beneath the surface. A door of light, shifting, woven from water itself. It was a passage, but not to any place she knew. Drawn by a pulse she could not name, she stepped in. The water closed gently behind her. She found herself standing in a garden, not a garden of earth, but of water. Roots hung like curtains. Flowers glowed with a pale, deep light. Stones floated without falling. The air smelled of rain and shadow. It was silent, but not empty. There were creatures, though not as we know them. Fish with scales like silver leaves, birds with feathers woven of mist, trees whose branches reached both down and up as if embracing the world and its reflection. At the garden's center grew a tree, ancient beyond measure. Its bark was dark as night, but its leaves shimmered with star fire. It was called the Tree of Breath. They say the tree held the memory of the world, every story ever told, every name ever spoken, every sigh ever whispered. Zari approached. The tree spoke, not in words, but in feeling, a deep hum that settled in her bones. It offered her a gift, a single leaf, shimmering with light. Carry this, it seemed to say. Carry it so the stories do not fade. Zari took the leaf and returned to the river bank. She planted it in the soil beneath the oldest date palm. The leaf took root and grew, not as a tree, but as a whisper. From that day, Zari could hear the river's stories more clearly. She knew the names of fish and birds before they were born. She could feel the future of the soil beneath her feet. People came to her with their fears, their dreams, their wounds. She healed with herbs, yes. But more than that, she healed with stories. Stories carried on the river's breath. Stories that mended sorrow and silence. But stories are fragile, and with time, the river's voice grew faint. The cities rose, noisy and bright, carving walls that boxed the sky and caged the wind. The garden beneath the Tigris was forgotten. Only Zari's leaf remained, buried beneath dust, beneath stone, beneath the passage of countless feet. Yet the leaf did not die. It waited. And still it waits, beneath the river's flow, beneath the stories told and untold, beneath the breath of those who remember. If you listen, when the night is deep and the water still, you can hear it. A faint song, a rustle of leaves, a whisper carried on the current. It is the garden calling. It is the river breathing. It is the promise that stories endure. Have you ever held a secret so deep you could feel it humming in your blood? Have you ever wished to carry the memory of the world, softly, silently, like a leaf in the wind? Perhaps the garden beneath the Tigris waits for you too. And in that waiting, there is peace. Have you ever walked among ruins and felt a presence that was not wind, not time, not memory, but something watching, waiting, woven into stone? They say there is a place in the southern sands where no stars dare to shine, where the air itself forgets its breath and the silence is thick as blood. It is there, beneath layers of time, sand and shadow, that the veil lies, the veil of forgotten kings. Not all rulers are remembered. Not all thrones are carved in gold. Some kings ruled in darkness, with crowns made not of metal, but of sorrow and silence. Their names are not spoken, not even in whispers, but still they exist, and the land remembers them. The story begins with a boy named Tammuz, who wandered the ruins of the buried city of Kien-Lil, a place that no longer appeared on maps, if it ever had. Tammuz was orphaned by war, raised by wind and stone, with nothing but a reed flute and a question that haunted his sleep. Why do the kings no longer speak? Everywhere he went, he saw temples crumbling, statues with their mouths broken, thrones cracked in two. And in every corner of the land, the same dream. A voice buried under stone, a crown in the dust, a name he could not quite recall. One night, in the hollow hour between moonfall and dawn, the sand beneath his feet gave way. He fell into a chasm, deeper than breath, deeper than fear. And when he awoke, he found himself in a cavern lit by no torch, no flame, only the soft glow of memory. The walls were carved with names, but all were half erased. Rows upon rows of thrones stood in silence, and on each sat a figure shrouded in robes of dust. Their faces were veiled. Their hands rested on stone scepters. But none moved, none breathed, and above them a great cloth of shadow was suspended from the cavern ceiling, wide as sky, soft as ash. This was the veil of forgotten kings. It is said that these were the rulers who chose silence, kings and queens who turned from conquest and glory, who refused to be carved into stone or sung in triumph. They ruled not by sword, but by surrender. They died with their secrets intact. Their names were gifts they gave back to the earth. But now, something stirred. Tammuz heard it, a single rhythmic sound, like breath caught in sorrow. He approached the nearest throne. The veiled figure before him did not move, but a whisper reached his ears. "Do you remember me?" Tammuz wept, though he did not know why. One by one, the veiled kings whispered, "We ruled the dreamtime. We spoke with the stars before fire knew its name. We held the silence together, but now the silence is breaking." And then, from beneath the veil above, something drifted down, a crown. But it was not made of gold or silver. It was woven from thread, black, silver, and indigo. It pulsed like a heartbeat, humming with ancient breath. The kings, still seated, turned their veiled faces toward him, and the crown settled on his brow. What happened next is not written in clay nor sung in hymn, but those who lived near the ruins began to speak of dreams. Dreams of a boy king who bore no name, who wandered the night with stars in his eyes and silence in his mouth. He touched the sick, and they wept. He sang to the wind, and it calmed. He listened to the forgotten, and they felt heard. Tammuz had become the bearer of memory, not just of the veiled kings, but of every voice lost to dust. He became a vessel. He walked across the deserts, down through river, valleys, into cities and caves and wind-swept hills. Wherever he went, silence followed. Not an emptiness, but a presence. People bowed, not because he demanded it, but because they felt something return through him. A stillness older than time, a hush sacred enough to touch the bones. But he never spoke. Not once. Not even when asked his name. And when the time came, as it comes for all, he returned to the place he fell. The cavern had vanished, but the sand knew him, and as he lay down beneath the moonless sky, the wind wrapped around him like a veil. They say the veil returned to the sky that night, not above a cavern, but stretched across the heavens. You can still see it, they say, when the sky turns indigo just before dawn. A shimmer, a hush, a breath between stars. And so it was. The Vale of Forgotten Kings is not a place. It is a remembering. It lives in the mouths of those who speak with care. It lives in the hearts of those who kneel beside stone and weep for names they do not know. It lives in the silence between your breaths. Have you ever wondered what was lost beneath your name? Have you ever felt a weight in the stillness of night, as if the sky remembered something you had forgotten? Perhaps you too carry a crown, not made of gold. Perhaps you too are a whisper in the veil. Let it rest, let it breathe, let it become part of the silence that holds us all.